super stoked to be releasing our spring shipment. We have a lovely selection of 6 wines from the 23 and 22 vintage. We are kicking it off with some Bubs.
So this is our 2023 Mencia Pet-Nat. This will be the 3rd vintage of this wine as we continue to dial in the process and also just kind of work on the farming to really produce the best sparkling style that we can. As some of you know, we also do produce a red wine version of this that is generally released in the fall allocation. This is a way of producing sparkling wine that actually predates the invention of champagne by nearly a century, actually. So this is also in some circles known as the original style of champagne.
Which means that it is fermented almost to dryness when we bottle it, and it finishes the fermentation in bottle and captures all the sparkle. And that's why this is pétillant naturel and not traditional method champagne or traditional method sparkling. As you can see, the color of this is really beautiful, and this is actually coming from the direct skins of the Mencia grape variety, which I fell in love with when I was working with Spanish producers in Bierzo and Ribera Sacra. Really deeply pigmented red grape variety, and that's what makes it so ideal for rosé production. Love the flavors that you get out of this. We harvest our rosé wines, or our grapes for rosé, fully ripe. So we're not picking early picked grapes, underripe flavors, which is pretty unique in terms of how we make rosé. And so this has a lot of the same flavors as our red, but it has like more of the blood orange, a little bit more pepperiness, a little bit more like sauvage, wild gaminess to it. Makes it a really fun bubbly that you can drink either at breakfast or anytime really. This is perfect with brunch fare, like smoked salmon, bagels, lox bagels, things like that is really perfect with it. Something that has a little bit of oiliness to it. Otherwise, anything that has, a charcuterie plate, some of those, salami, prosciutto, hamon kind of flavors would go really well with this.
Yes, savory pastries come to mind. Yeah.
Something buttery, something rich. The next wine this is the 2nd time we've released an Arneis. This is from the Aurora vineyard, which is Old Vine Arneis. So these vines were planted in the mid-80s by Louisa Ponzi when she came back from working at Vieri in northern Italy in the Piedmont region. She planted Arneis, which is a grape variety that's at home in the Piedmont and Rero regions of northern Italy. And it's the only planting of this variety in Oregon, and certainly was the first planting of this variety in the US, and we're extremely lucky to work with it. I really like the flavors that we get off of these old vines. They tend to be quite concentrated in terms of the clusters that they produce, so they have really, really good flavor profile. They smell pretty tropical when they're fermenting, almost a little Sauvignon Blanc-ish at times, but once they're finished fermenting in barrel, have a really nice sort of orchard fruit, and the chestnut barrels that we use for fermentation give a really nice like floral, chamomile, white blossom kind of lift to the fruit as well.
And I think it sounds a little cliche, but nutty too. The grape variety, the wines that are produced with some amount of age, nothing crazy, but as they age, they tend to gain, they're well known to gain sort of a bit of a nutty flavor from Italy, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in Italy, they have a really like Marcona almond, sort of cashew nut flavor profile that develops along with the citrus fruit and orchard fruit profile. And we find that this also happens quite naturally in the fermentation and aging process here. And we didn't plant Arneis. limited edition is about working with growers to plant new varieties in the Willamette Valley. It's about diversifying the varietal landscape here, both for a more sustainable future, but also just for a more interesting drinking future. We have to live here as well, and we want to drink a lot of, delicious and different things, as we know you do. So we love being able to explore new varieties, and we were super honored when Louisa Ponzi reached out to us and asked if we wanted to work with her Old Vine Arneis fruit.
Chenin Blanc Noble Dry. So this is 5th vintage of this wine. So this is one of the wines that actually has been produced since our very first year, 2019. So to celebrate our 5-year anniversary, we're proud to present you the 5th edition of the limited edition Chenin Blanc Noble Dry. So this has been one of our most successful wines every single year. I don't mean just like the highest quality or something along those lines, but it tends to create the most amount of conversation as well. People are very, very shocked by it. And anyway, it's proving so far to be just incredibly effective at defending itself against the climatic conditions that we face here in the Willamette Valley. One of the challenges that we have to deal with here is heavy humidity, rainfall, frost, lots of different weather events that can threaten our crop. And one of the reasons why Brie and I had decided to experiment with Chenin Blanc was everything that we knew about Chenin Blanc had indicated that it would be perfect for this area, not because of the climate of how hot it is or what the soil type is or some other conversations that are more common, but actually looking at what grape varieties could potentially survive the best from all of the threats. And that's really, I don't think, a conversation that's ever been had in the Willamette Valley, at least not since the 1960s when the original pioneers had started planting. So one of the things about Chenin Blanc that's so amazing is we can spray the fruit a lot less in the vineyard, and sprays, of course, are probably the biggest source of impact that we can have on the environment, not just the vineyard, but with spray drift and all kinds of things, which is another reason why we insist on farming organically at a minimum, and also biodynamic, which we'll talk about here soon. We're able to put in a lot fewer sprays, which means we're impacting the environment a lot less, which we're really, really excited about. The trade-off there is that we do develop botrytis in not every vintage, but in most vintages. And botrytis is a fungus that grows on the grapes that is incredibly beneficial for producing a lot of complexity, concentration, a lot of power in the fruit and in the wine as a result. Instead of producing a really good, or instead of producing a really, really good wine, produces a really, really great wine. And so that's kind of one of the quality differences that comes from that.
The next wine is our 2023 Trousseau. It is a grape variety that is at home in the Jura region of France, just east of Burgundy, and also is grown in Portugal's Douro Valley. So two very different climates for this grape variety, which I think is kind of fun to think about when we talk about, oh, this variety is only perfect for this particular region of the world. And yet you have the homeland for this variety in two drastically different regions. The Jura being, Swiss Alps or the French Alps, Douro Valley being a very hot river valley. And Trousseau makes exceptional wines in both of those places, but different styles. In the Willamette Valley, it does edge more towards Jura style, being a more alpine red wine or a lighter bodied red wine with a little bit more of those like alpine red fruit flavors, which gives it a lot of energy, but it also harnesses some of the Douro characteristics, which tend to be sort of an earthy rose petal, like fresh beet sort of character that comes from the wine as well. And so this has always been one of our favorite grape varieties to work with. And while Eola Springs was the original vineyard that we had this planted in, we now work with this variety across 4 different vineyards. We're going to be seeing a lot more of how this variety performs on different aspects of slope and different soil types and different vineyards within the Willamette Valley, which is part of what we're trying to do with the expansion of all of these different grape varieties as well.
So Gamay Gamay's been planted here actually as long as we know. Gamay's been planted here since the early 1980s. So it has been around for a good amount of time. However, it's just never really gained any real momentum. And I think it's always been in the shadow of the fame of Pinot Noir, and I think the same kind of in Burgundy and France is similar. I feel like more and more people have been gravitating towards drinking more Beaujolais than ever before, and I believe it's because those wines have been retaining good acidity for longer over the last 10 to 20 years than their Pinot Noir equivalents have been. It's just a much higher acid red grape. And here in the Willamette Valley, we are seeing that Pinot Noir is softening. Acidity, acid profiles are softening. And we're seeing Gamay Noir actually really kind of coming into more of its moment, where people are looking at it for a naturally occurring high acidity grape variety that can handle the warmer weather that we've been having.
Gamay Noir, because it is a more vigorous variety, it tends to have bigger clusters and be better yielding than Pinot Noir. It also ripens later in the growing season, and what that means is that it does its flavor development through a cooler part of the growing season than Pinot Noir does. And what that means for the wine is that it's actually developing a lot more complex flavors and a lot more layers of complex flavors, while the sugars are lagging behind. And so we're actually getting to more of the point where we can pick Gamay Noir really at the optimal harvest point for it to have moderate alcohol, be a medium-bodied wine, but also have a ton of flavor. Really interested in is wines that have energy and layers of flavor and spice and complexity, rather than being sort of higher alcohol, boozier wines, but with just sort of a one-dimensional, oh, I taste like cherries or I taste like strawberries kind of flavor profile. And then you have to add in things like new oak and things like that to bring in smoke and baking spice and vanilla and sweetness and all of these flavors that, I think Chad said it best one other time, a lot of those new oak flavors and sweet oak flavors don't really fit into a cool climate narrative with grape varieties that have, a lot of flavor. Like, they don't add anything to the grape variety, and instead kind of, dumb it down a little bit. And so I think when we're getting complex flavors at moderate alcohols, I think it means that we're ripening, or growing the right grape variety in the right place.
Okay, Cab Franc?
Yeah, this is your baby, because it's the Old Vine Cab Franc.
2022 vintage, which is what we'll have in the shipment. It's one of our favorite vintages so far for this wine. It's fun because 22 was not a warm vintage, and we are regularly reminded ourselves by our own work how astonishing a lot of these grape varieties perform, how astonishing well they perform, even in colder vintages. So 22 was a very, very late year. Noir, we can see the wines are leaner, which is not a bad thing. They're leaner, they're more high in acid, they're more reflective or similar to what I think Pinot Noir was 20 years ago here. Cabernet Franc, we also see that same kind of trend, but you gotta remember it's dialed down from what it can be, which is obviously incredibly rich and ripe and powerful. So in this particular vintage, we see this Cabernet Franc with a really nice acid line and a lot of restraints for Cabernet Franc, which is really remarkable. However, also still pretty much no signs of these green flavors that are oftentimes associated with Cabernet Franc, like bell pepper, jalapeno, green bean and things like that, and that's because of the climate that we have. It's not about ripening the fruit, it's about getting sunlight on the fruit. Direct sunlight on the fruit, those flavors degrade, and what you're left with is these really beautiful raspberry, blueberry, and really really intense
sage.
Ripe flavors. In California and in Washington, for the most part, where Cabernet Franc primarily grows, it's too hot there. If the farmers were to expose the fruit to the sun throughout the growing season, the sun would burn and destroy the fruit and they'd have no crop. And so this unique expression of Cabernet Franc is very specific to the Willamette Valley. This wine is not repeatable, I mean, like by a long shot. And that's one of the things that I love about this wine is from the beginning wine enthusiast all the way to masters of wine and master sommeliers and people who have been professionals and tasted for a really long time taste this wine and cannot fathom how it's possible, and also cannot possibly think of a way to replace this wine. So thinking globally, what else tastes like this? And there's nothing. There's nothing on the map that
unique to this place.
Yeah, by a big margin. This is not a splitting hairs comparison.
And what I love about this wine is that in 2022, as Chad noted, it was a colder, later vintage, and this is always one of our latest grape that we're picking close to Halloween. And the thing is that we still get warm weather during October here in the valley, but we get it interspersed with rain. And what I loved seeing was all of these other vineyard managers out in our block of Cabernet Franc showing each other, hey, this is the grape variety that should be planted here, because the cluster morphology of Cabernet Franc is the complete antithesis of what Pinot Noir is. So Pinot means pine cone, and so it's a tiny little pine cone of a bunch, and so it has no room for swelling or anything when it gets wet. And so that means it's also a thin-skinned grape variety, and so when it does get wet, it starts to melt on the vine, especially when you're getting to that phase where it's close to ripeness. And Cabernet Franc is the opposite of that. It's a loose cluster, it has tiny berries and thick skins, and the rain just falls through it. And it continues to ripen, it doesn't split, it doesn't get rot. And for me, seeing those other vineyard managers out in our block showing each other and talking to each other, you know, viticulturists who have only seen Pinot Noir here grown for fucking 30 years, you know, that's remarkable to me and to us. And I think that is, you know, a continued conversation that we want to keep having here, and why it's so important to continue to experiment and, you know, have the trust of our growers who are taking this ride with us, to learn, you know, about what the future and what this valley is capable of. This valley is an exceptional growing region. We don't need irrigation like California and Washington do. Sunshine, but not extreme heat. We are dry farmed, so we don't have any rainfall during the growing season, but we also don't need irrigation. And so this is a really unique growing region, and we are so capable of growing things other than one single grape variety. And that's what we're interested in exploring, and that's what this wine is all about. And this is what really sort of was the foundation for the rest of the plantings that we talk about with growers. We appreciate all of you investing in us and going on this journey with us. We are incredibly grateful to be doing the work that we're doing and to be sharing our art and our craft with all of you. So please, come visit us at the tasting room. Come visit Carrie at our tasting room in Gaston. We're right above our winery, and you'll often find Chad and I here in the cellar, and you're welcome to come and do some barrel tasting with us. walk up the hill and explore the vineyard. It's a beautiful site out here. It's quite, remote, but it's really beautiful and really special. So please come out, share our space and our work, and I know the whole team would love to see you all.